happy to do questions, right? 90 minutes, because listening to me for 90 minutes, I don't know. It is so wonderful to be here with you today, and I just want to thank Diane and Arrowhead Gardens, and just make sure everybody knows that our office is here to help you. We have a remarkable constituent services team that makes sure that whatever questions you have about any federal agency, we are here to answer that for you. We've been able to get millions of dollars back to our constituents who are struggling with the Social Security Administration or veterans or any federal agency that's giving you a challenge to get through the bureaucracy sometimes. We will make sure that we help. But we want to make sure that you can access all the resources that the federal government offers. And one of the things that the other side has done is they've continuously cut resources from those agencies. So it makes it very difficult for those agencies to fully function. And so our job here is to make sure that we get the services that you want, and that people recognize how important government is. For those of you who don't know me, I'm honored to represent this district and in Congress, and I've been here for 8 years. I was a longtime civil rights, immigrant rights activist before coming to Congress, and it's a great honor to represent the 7th Congressional District. This town hall, originally, we can talk about anything you want, but originally I think Diane wanted me to talk about Trump's Project 2025. What's in it, what you need to be aware of. We did an amazing town hall for our constituents. By the way, we've done over 110 town halls across the district. And it's an opportunity, it's an amazing opportunity for me to hear from you, to be able to tell you what I'm working on, and of course to answer whatever questions you have. We did a town hall on Trump's Project 2025 because I think it's incredibly important for people to understand what the choice is that is before us in just a few weeks, and what the strategy and the plan is if Donald Trump were to get into the White House. What would happen? What are they actually proposing? And what's been interesting is I chair the Congressional Progressive Caucus in Congress. That's about 100 members who have been fighting for Medicare for all and universal health care and universal education, and making sure that we eradicate poverty, and making sure that we enhance Social Security. So many things that I know this district cares so much about. And I think that when you look at Project 2025, the minute we started talking about it as Trump's Project 2025, we established a task force within the Democratic Caucus and within the Progressive Caucus called the Stop Project 2025 Task Force. And it was amazing how the more and more and more we were able to get people to talk about Project 2025 and to understand that this was Donald Trump's plan and Stephen Miller's plan and all of the others who have been with Donald Trump over the years, we found that Donald Trump and his campaign were distancing themselves from Project 2025 and saying it has nothing to do with us. So I want to just address some of those things today, and go through a little bit of what is in there, and also how this is absolutely the plan if Donald Trump were to get back into the White House. And even if he doesn't get back into the White House, by the way, it is still the plan of many of these folks who have been fighting us on some of the things that are so important to all of us in this room. Donald Trump is continuously going to tell you he has nothing to do with it. But Project 2025 was handcrafted by his extreme MAGA Republican allies. It is, in a very simple term, it is a complete authoritarian takeover of the federal government on every issue that you can imagine, from abortion, law enforcement, democracy, Social Security, and more. And it really is, in my view, a threat to our country, to our values, to our ideals, and to our collective vision for a brighter future. I want to go through a little bit of what is in it. And I'm just picking out, it's actually a 900 page plus document. And so I'm not going to go through all 900 pages, but I do want to pick out a few things that I think will be of importance to you. So I want to start with abortion. Trump's Project 2025 outlines a whole of government approach to eliminating the right to abortion. It restricts birth control. It calls for the federal government to stop enforcing the laws that require hospitals to provide emergency care to pregnant people whose lives are at risk. It even envisions a world in which the Department of Health and Human Services would monitor women's bodies and healthcare decisions. And I know that sounds crazy, but it is actually right there on page 455 of this 922-page manifesto. It says, quote, HHS should use every available tool to ensure that each state reports exactly how many abortions happen, for what reason, and where the mother lives. And on page 489, it calls on HHS to align its mission statement with radical anti-choice policies, those are my words, by, quote, explicitly rejecting the notion that abortion is healthcare. So this would be mandatory. It would be invasive government surveillance of private health decisions, of our own freedom to choose and make decisions about our own bodies. These extremist proposals on abortion rights are a direct attack on our fundamental freedoms, our economic freedoms, and our reproductive freedoms. Our abilities to make decisions about our own bodies is absolutely crucial. And I say this from a very personal perspective as one of the 1 in 4 women in America who has had an abortion. I never thought I'd be publicly talking about it. But when I got to Congress and I realized people were trying to take that right away, I felt it was important to use my platform to say, not that I think everyone should have an abortion, not at all. I think the decision should be made by the individual person. Nobody else could know my medical condition, my economic condition, or what my doctor is telling me. Nobody should know that. And I should be able to choose what is right for me. Just as I don't want to force anyone else to do or not do something, I don't think they should force me to do something myself. And so that is the right that I want to preserve for every person. Because we know that once the government starts surveilling our healthcare, our doctor's offices, it's not going to stop just at abortion. And you've seen that with the attempts to cut off access to contraceptive care or even to IVF treatment. So meanwhile, Democrats have fought consistently to protect and expand access to reproductive health care. We passed the Women's Health Protection Act. We have fought to preserve access to mifepristone and all forms of contraception because reproductive care is health care. So that's one piece, but let me go on to a few other pieces of what Project 2025 covers. This extreme agenda also does give to the president unchecked power. So no checks and balances. It would actually place the Department of Justice and the FBI, agencies that are meant to be completely independent, under the direct control of the president. They want the FBI director to be, quote, politically accountable to the president. That's what happens in dictatorships, not in democracies. This proposal, Trump's proposal, would also allow the president to have total control over the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, and that entire department that is responsible for upholding the rule of law and for keeping our country safe and protecting our civil rights. So in this vision, the president would just tell the Attorney General what the Attorney General should or should not enforce, and make the Attorney General completely subservient to the president's political will. And this is part of an even larger plan to essentially politicize all agency leadership. So you see this throughout the Project 2025 document, 900-page document. Their plan would replace tens of thousands of career civil servants, like Diane and others, who have served our country in a nonpartisan way for decades. and know the ins and outs of the agencies that they work with. Those agencies are absolutely critical to having the work done in a way that isn't partisan, that is just about every American getting access to those services. But this would replace those tens of thousands of nonpartisan staff who are experts in their fields with political appointees who would again do only what the president wants them to do, not what the science tells them, not what health, what the medical data tells them, none of that, but just what the president wants them to do. And it would undermine every aspect of independence in our government and really erode our system of checks and balances. But this agenda, Trump's Project 2025 agenda, doesn't just go after high-level government plans and policies. It also targets programs that Americans, including many of you in this room, rely on every single day. And I want to talk about Project 2025 goals to cut one of our most important urban benefits, and that is Medicare. Medicare, as you know, currently provides health coverage for over 67 million Americans, as seniors and vulnerable Americans, and it's an indispensable part of our nation's healthcare system, and one that many Americans rely on. Project 2025 wants to completely privatize Medicare and hand it over to the private insurance companies who currently are running the Medicare Advantage program. I like to call it Medicare Disadvantage, not because some of you may have Medicare Advantage plans, but because the way in which those advantage or disadvantage plans are working today is charging you more and giving you less. So we've had a number of constituents who have come to our office for help because they thought they were getting something really fantastic with Medicare Disadvantage. They signed up for the plan, they were promised all kinds of things, and they got the traditional Medicare, and then realized that they actually could not get care that they needed, that they would have been afforded under Medicare. But now that you're off, it's extremely difficult to get back on traditional Medicare. You have to wait until the next enrollment period. So, and even then, in some places it's not possible at all. So, Medicare Disadvantage has been taking people's money and providing far less services. That's the model that Donald Trump and Project 2025 want to use. Medicare Disadvantage, I call it, is run by private insurance companies who take shortcuts and put profits over patients. And the data shows that you have much worse outcomes if you're on Medicare Advantage plan versus on traditional Medicare. What we need to do is expand Medicare so that it actually covers the things that some of these Advantage plans offer that make them so appealing to people. We need to make sure that you get dental, vision, and hearing in Medicare. We need to make sure it's covering all the healthcare needs that you have. And we need to protect traditional Medicare from what is a lot of fraud used by these private insurance companies that run that program. Trump's Project 2025 promotes the fully privatized version of Medicare. And the focus, you won't be surprised to hear, is on increasing profits for the CEOs of those private health insurance companies. That would be annual giveaways of billions of dollars, all at the expense of you, Medicare enrollees, and taxpayers. And it would mean restrictions in the ability to choose your doctor or your provider. It would mean care delays and denials of critically important procedures just because they're expensive. They cost much. The goal here would be to spend as little as possible by the private health insurance companies and to maximize profits for CEOs and shareholders. That is not what Medicare is about. That's not what it's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about providing the health care that you all need, that Medicare beneficiaries need and deserve, and make sure that you can actually afford that care. Project 2025 is not just going after Medicare, they're also going after Social Security. Earlier this year, the Republican Study Committee, which is a group that represents 80% of House Republicans and 100% of House Republican leadership, released a budget that devastates the entire Social Security program. It calls for $1.5 trillion in cuts to Social Security. It increases the retirement age to 69. It cuts disability benefits. And it does none of the things that we actually know we need to do to improve Social Security, which is in our plan, Social Security 2100, a bill that almost got to the floor last year and didn't. Their version of Social Security would force us to work longer for less, and it would also mean all of these cuts to Social Security would mean longer wait times, reduced service, and fewer earned benefits from a program that we've paid into all of our lives. I really hate it when people say, oh, you know, Social Security is an entitlement program. No, it's not. It is an earned benefits program. People pay into it your entire life so that when you are unable to work, you now have the opportunity to have something coming back. In my view, it's the best of what it means to fight for the common good, because your dollars pay for somebody, when you're working, your dollars pay for somebody who is just retiring. And that continues for generations. So somebody else's dollars, somebody else's working is paying for your benefits today. And if we just continue that, we're taking care of each other and we're promoting the common good. Social Security benefits under their plan would be cut for 257 million people. So 3 out of 4 Americans would see a massive cut in Social Security under their plan. So in sum, and those are just a few things, and I'm happy to talk about anything else you want to talk about that I pulled out that I thought you would care about. It is a dangerous plan. Trump's Project 2025 is a dangerous plan. It puts corporations first and people last, which is what we saw with the Trump tax cuts that increased our deficit by $2 trillion, and 90% of those tax cuts went to the wealthiest 1% of the country. It dismantles our government institutions, it takes away our freedoms, and it tears down the programs that we rely on the most. When you compare that to what we are fighting for as Democrats, I think the difference could be more clear. Under the leadership of President Biden and Vice President Harris, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, the largest investment ever in taking on climate change, creating a climate corps where people can actually get paid for protecting our public lands. Finally, passing legislation that requires Medicare to negotiate with those big pharmaceutical drug companies, right? 10 drugs that we finally have, but we want to expand that. The Progressive Caucus was pushing for 50. We got 10, but we're going to do more if we can get back the trifecta. And those negotiated prices that for those 10 drugs, which Medicare enrollees paid a total of $3.4 billion with a B in out-of-pocket costs in 2022. Those are the 10 drugs we picked, the ones that are most expensive to our enrollees. This is just a game changer in our healthcare system, and it's going to save you enormous amounts of money and also ensure that more people have access to this life-saving medication at lower cost. We also capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Yes, I see you in the back. This is huge. And when you think about this, insulin costs pharmaceutical companies $5. And they were charging $800 a while. And we had people in this district who drive to Vancouver because in Canada, they negotiated the price of prescription drugs. And so insulin was much less. It was actually around $35. So that's where the $35 came from. They're making plenty of profit. $35, you pay $5, you're still making $30. And this is life-saving medication. And the idea that somebody who needs insulin would have to determine whether or not they're going to be able to pay for all the vials they need, or not have food, or not pay rent because they have to pay for that is just horrific. And so that price gouging is stopping, at least with these 10 drugs, and hopefully we can expand them more. We are also, I mentioned dental, vision, and hearing before. We got so close to adding dental, vision, and hearing in Build Back Better. to Medicare. So we, the Progressive Caucus, held the line until we were able to pass Build Back Better along with the infrastructure bill that had dental, vision, and hearing for all our seniors. And we know how important it is, and I don't understand why, just as you actually really need to make sure that you have your eyes, ears, and teeth in good shape, we would cut that off with Medicare. And so we're going to work very hard to do that. And we know that 90% of Americans agree with us that we should add these things. That is incredibly popular. I'm also pushing, by the way, to lower the eligibility age of Medicare to at least 60 and 65 right now. But we looked at some research that was done out of Stanford, and we found that the rates of cancer detection went up sharply at 65. And we were like, why is that? And we looked, and it's because people can't afford to go get themselves checked before they get on Medicare. So when they get on Medicare, they finally go, but in many cases, they find out they have cancer, and it's too late. We don't want it to be too late. Everybody in the richest country in the world should be able to have healthcare, universal healthcare. And that's why I'm fighting so hard, and I'm the lead sponsor of Medicare for All Act, which I'm going to keep pushing for, so that we can make that happen. We do have a choice in how our government works. It's called voting. It's coming up in a couple of weeks. And I think the choice that we have in front of us is very, very clear. Democrats want to build our country, build our democracy, make sure that people have what they need to be healthy throughout their lives, from birth until you pass. Republicans are trying to take so much of that away, and you can see it in the agenda of what we have to vote on every day, and you can see it in the agenda of the Trump Project 2025 document. Trump has consistently said, I have nothing to do with that. But in fact, when we've looked at who wrote Project 2025, these are almost a dozen cabinet secretaries that served under Donald Trump, hundreds of people who were in senior positions in the Trump administration. So very hard to argue that you know nothing about it or that it's not your agenda. Many of the things pick up on the first 4 years that Donald Trump was president. So again, in addition, probably heard about the plan to do mass deportations across the country. I would just say to you, anybody, and you all know I'm a longtime immigrant rights activist and advocate, anybody who thinks this country could even survive if all those immigrants were deported is not living in reality, because immigrants have been so important and so vital to our nation. And Donald Trump wants to try and turn us against each other. And so we're pushing very hard for humane immigration reform so that we can have a path to citizenship, so that we can provide legal pathways, so that we can continue to have a country where a 16-year-old girl with nothing in her pockets could come over to the United States by herself, as I did, with no parents and no money, and ultimately become your representative in Congress. So I want that to continue for many, many other people, and that's called paying it forward. So thank you all so much. And I know I was told no questions. I think. Oh. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Nikki? Yes, hi. I just wanted to know, when Kamala wins and they have a transition of power, are they ready for what could possibly happen like you did last year?
Yeah, we are doing a lot to try to make sure, and just to repeat the question, when Kamala wins, I don't know if you said when or if, but I'm gonna say when, okay. And this is, I think this is an official side town hall, so I have to be careful about, not talking about the campaign side, but are we ready for what might happen? Yes, as you all know, I was trapped in the gallery on January 6th. Some of you may have seen, I think that my face was plastered all over TV because we were stuck there, and insurrectionists were pounding on the door, trying to kill us, trying to hang Mike Pence, trying to find Nancy Pelosi and kill her. And it was horrific. I never imagined in a million years that in the United States of America, we would have the worst attack on the United States Capitol since the War of 1812. I mean, it was stunning. And so I think we are doing what we can to plan. I will say that the sitting vice president presides over the chamber. And so we will have Kamala Harris doing the job that Mike Pence was doing and ultimately did the right thing. Mike Pence did the right thing. That's why he's not on the stage with Donald Trump for the vice presidential debate, as Tim Walz said last night, because he stood up to Donald Trump and did what was right for our democracy. And so I think we're trying to prepare for those eventualities. We are worried because of what's happening in states across the country to allow false slates of electors and things like that. But we do have legal teams that are working on all of that. And I think the most important thing is to make sure it's not a close election and to make sure that we do everything we can to present the contrast to people.
Yeah, I understand that project 25 has plans to gut public education. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you. It completely gets rid of the Department of Public Education, the Department of Education. And so this is, again, what the Project 2025 people envision, and I sit on the Ed and Labor Committee, so we're constantly voting on bills that address some portion of this vision, this dark vision, where it's private school vouchers, for-profit colleges, essentially a network that ensures that not everybody will get a quality education and that people will be able to make money off of education, will not be public education anymore, and that we continue to stop people and discriminate against people based on whether or not they can afford what will become the Department of Public Education. They want to ban books across the country. We've already seen that. That is a way to control it. And I will say it is a very fascist vision of all of the different departments of government. It is a very Christian, right-wing Christian nationalist agenda. And so they would like for that to be what the model is for schools. And I think it is incredibly dangerous. And they haven't really made a secret of it if you look at the attempts to not even talk about our history of slavery in this country, or, you know, to somehow make fun of DEI programs, which most people don't even know what that stands for. Diversity, equity, inclusion. Definitely earned it is how we talk about it when they try to relate it to Vice President Harris or somebody else. I think it's a dark vision that aims to keep people from actually understanding facts, science, being educated, and having access to the things that would allow you to build a better life. Eliminating the Department of Education is sort of central to that.
In the last election, last presidential election, approximately 47% of those eligible to vote in this country did not. So from your perspective, can you tell me why you think we have reached a number that high, and how do we actually change that? Because I'm still hearing out in the ether now, I'm not going to vote. It makes no sense to me, but that number is astronomical, because those people who don't vote are who are responsible for who does get into office, believe me.
Yeah, no, this is really an important question, and one I'm very passionate about, spent a lot of time before coming to Congress as well as in Congress working on. So I think there are a couple of things. We should make voting as easy as possible, right? We should have a national holiday on election day. Let everybody vote. And let it not be a problem that you have to be at work. We have done a lot in Washington State to make it easier by having mail-in voting. So that allows us to allow people to vote at home and to drop it off. We started paying for postage. That is one of the better systems in the country. So making voting easier is really important. In the South, it's the opposite. And a lot of what Republican legislatures have done in the South is deliberately take away the ability to vote. The idea that you couldn't be given water when you're standing in line, right, to vote, if you don't have mail-in voting and you have to wait 3 hours in the hot sun, that somebody can't come and give you water, that it's illegal to give you water, or that you have to every cycle re-register yourself, right? It's not that you're there all the time, but in the name of safety and security. And by the way, don't believe anything that is said about fraud in voting systems. We actually don't have that. It is, the data shows it is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of people that have any fraud, in participating in voting. So the second thing is we have to expand access to voting, particularly in states that have been taking it away. The third thing is a little more complicated. I think that our electoral college system has made it so that people feel like their vote isn't important, right? It isn't one vote, one person, one vote. It really is, it comes down to sometimes just a couple of states to determine the result of the presidential election. And now, more often than not, in the last couple of elections, we don't have a president. This isn't true with Joe Biden, but with Donald Trump, we didn't have a president who was elected by the popular vote. And so I think there are a lot of, I believe we should get rid of the electoral college. I think that's really, really important. And we need to make it so that everyone's vote counts. If you're in Washington State, you should count for the presidential. Whereas you see where the candidates are going, it's not to Washington State except for money. You know, we are an ATM for a lot of candidates, but a lot of people feel like, well, my vote's not important if I'm in Washington State. Fourth issue, we got to get money out of politics. We just have to get money out of politics. It is absolutely, and I don't take any corporate PAC money. When I ran 8 years ago, I think I was one of 3 people in Congress who didn't take corporate PAC money. Now we have maybe 60. But the amount of money that flows into our elections and the way in which people can literally buy an election. I know this time around, there were some people who didn't like me, so they wanted to try and take me out. So they were offering a lot of money to people to run against me. They did a big poll. I got 80% of the vote. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. But this is a constant thing that comes up. And for people who aren't incumbents, think about the fact that in my sister's race, as an example, she ran in Oregon for Congress for an open seat. $7.5 million came in the last 18 days of her race. $7.5 million in the Portland media market is like 20 million in Seattle or New York. Constant 24/7 attack ads against her. She had a 20-point lead, but she lost. So that's what happens with, and money, by the way, there was like Republican donors who gave $1 million in that seat. So how can we say that we have a real democracy if we're not making sure that we have a public financing system and actual transparency so that corporations and the wealthiest individuals don't get to buy our seats? Because it's pretty cheap actually for them if you think about the long-term benefit that they get of putting in somebody that they've bought and paid for. So we really do, I think that discourages people because so much of what happens in government is not reflecting the will of voters. And so they say, well, what does it matter? I voted, but somebody put $7.5 million in and drowned out my vote. And then the last thing I'll say is we got to get rid of the filibuster. Yes. It is a Jim Crow legacy structural problem in our system. And so what happens is we pass all kinds of bills with a simple majority in the House. And I'll tell you, I was pretty political before I got in, but I did not understand. Are you saying yes? So I was pretty political. Yep. But I did not understand how crazy the filibuster is. The filibuster is the structural tool to ensure that what voters want across the country never happens or happens very rarely, because it requires 60 votes in the Senate to even debate a bill, not just to vote on a bill, but just to debate a bill. So what happens? We tell everybody, vote for us. We're going to get all these things done. We're going to codify abortion. We're going to raise the minimum wage, $7.25 minimum wage, right? Hasn't been raised in decades. We're going to strengthen collective bargaining. We're going to expand Social Security, blah, blah, blah. Get us in, we will get it done. We get in. Voters say, I gave you the House, the Senate, and the White House. How come you couldn't get it done? Well, because we pass all bills in the House with a simple majority, then they go to the Senate, and 40 largely white men, I'm married to a wonderful one, so I love you all, but 40 largely white men who represent 12% of the country's population, 12%, they can block anything from being debated or voted on. How does that make sense? So particularly with young people who I talk to, I work a lot trying to turn out the vote with young people, with folks of color, with immigrants, and people will say to me, it doesn't matter. We can get you in, but unless you get rid of, well, actually they don't always know about the filibuster, but they say, we got you in, but you didn't codify abortion rights. You didn't do this, you didn't do that. And I say, yeah, it's because of the filibuster. And then they say, well, change it. And they're right. We can change it with a simple majority. And Vice President Harris did recently say that she would get rid of, suspend the filibuster to codify abortion rights. I think we should eliminate it entirely. And I think we should get gun reform, sensible gun reform done so that our children aren't cowering behind their desks when they go to school. We should make sure we codify abortion rights. We should pass immigration reform, get it off the table. That's why we haven't passed it in 30 years. There is so much, raise the minimum wage, invest in housing. There's so much that we could do, and actually that the majority of the country wants us to do. It is not true that independents or even Republicans don't want universal health care or don't want childcare or don't want comprehensive immigration reform. The majority of the country is just frustrated that we never get it done, and they want stuff to work and they want their lives to be different.
I think one thing, just in addition to what you just said, in order for your voice to count, you have to use your voice. And we don't do that enough. You can write a letter, you can make a phone call, you can show up at their office, you can do all kinds of things. And in many of the states where people are less cooperative than what we have here, that's not what's happening. They don't do it because they don't believe that it counts. Yeah. But it does.
Right. And thank you. We love your letters and your phone calls. I think we are still one of the districts that gets the most letters, phone calls, and emails. So thank you. We appreciate it. We love it.
One more?
I think so.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'll give you, yeah.
So not to belabor the point, but filibuster, what does it take to get rid of it?
A simple majority. Now, the only thing you will hear on the filibuster, people, no, you can't. You can actually, with a simple majority threshold, you can get rid of the majority party can get rid of the filibuster. What's interesting is Republicans did it for the Supreme Court.
Yes, it is.
Okay. They also did it for taxes. For the budget, we can pass things with a simple majority, right? Tax reform, the Trump tax cuts didn't pass with 60 vote threshold because they removed it. Right. So we're fine to give tax cuts to the wealthiest with a simple majority, but and Republicans were in charge at the time. So the one argument you may hear, and I'll just address it now, is that if you get rid of the filibuster, it applies not just for you, but it applies if we lose Congress and it goes to the Republicans, right? So if you have a Democratic majority or a Republican majority, it changes it forever. Well, my response to that is, if we don't change the filibuster when we have control, we will continue to lose Congress. We will lose the White House because people are so frustrated by the fact that things that should be simple, background checks for guns, or even immigration reform, or raising the minimum wage, they're so frustrated that we don't get anything done. It's just like a giant gridlock with this very partisan nature of politics that we have today. And so I believe our ideas will win. And if we can get some of these things done, we will encourage people to believe in the system, to believe in government, And we can continue to strengthen government. Like we put a bunch of money through the Inflation Reduction Act into the IRS because the IRS was starting to go, all they had money to do was go after people that actually filed their taxes and didn't know very much money, but maybe didn't have an accountant to, to actually file their taxes. So maybe there was some small mistake. Now, the resources we put into the IRS means they're going after the wealthiest tax cheats. And they brought in over $1 billion just in the last year because they went after the wealthiest tax cheats who were trying to game the system and had a lot of accounts. So if we can strengthen the resources of Social Security, of Medicare, of IRS, make sure that our government services are actually working, that would be, I think, what would give people a vote of confidence in government and also help them to feel like, okay, my life is actually getting better because I voted. And I think that's a better proposition than being afraid that if we change it, Republicans, because I'll tell you, they already changed it for the Supreme Court and for taxes. So why don't we change it so we can actually get some of these things done?
That's great. All right. One quick one, Keith, and then we're done.
Until 1976, in the Supreme Court saying that money is speech, you go to prison for spending $2,000 on a candidate. But my question is, the mainstream media, and I don't mean Fox, the networks, they let too many lies go through in the name of balance. Quick example, Sunday morning talk shows, which I don't really like.
Question?
Yes. Republicans lied their brains out and they were not countered. And a Democrat who came on was not effective in calling the lies. They don't hear the lies being called off by the media or the Democratic people loud enough. They're getting away with the lies. How do we stop that?
Yeah, it's such an important question and it's frustrating to me. I mean, I stopped going on certain shows on a particular news channel that's considered, I'll say it's CNN, because like, we weren't, I felt like it wasn't fair coverage. I mean, I question in 2016, they covered Donald Trump so much, all of our news media. Yeah. And the way in which they've covered Joe Biden, I don't think has really been fair. Like we created more jobs than any other administration in the history of the country. Unemployment down to its lowest level in over 50 years. Was that ever covered? What's covered is the thing that gets the most clicks. And so it is very frustrating to those of us who aren't calling these things out. And I do think at the end of the day, we need to strengthen journalism. We need to make sure that independent newspapers are functioning. I have a bill for that. It's called the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act. We need to actually take on these big tech companies that are distorting the media. I have bills for that too. I call for the breakup of many of those companies. We have to make sure that we are actually telling the truth on TV and that there's some standard around that. Because you saw the debate the other night. One candidate got up and just lied the whole way through, and the moderators were not even supposed to be fact checking. Right. So we have to encourage people to do their own fact checking, but we have to increase the sources that are really about honesty and truth in information, and not investing in bigger clicks and more disinformation and misinformation.
And you have to take the profit out of the media.
That's why independent media is so incredibly important, and nonprofit media even more so. Well, thank you all so much. What a great conversation. So happy to be here, and make sure you get your ballots in. I would love to represent you again, and thank you, Diane, for organizing. Thank you for coming.
We really appreciate it. Hopefully it won't take years before you're back. Oh, good. You can come anytime.
If you all have any of the green cards, can you just wave them in the air and I'll collect them from you, if you're able.
Yes. Let's get one of the two ones. If everyone stays.